I've held off on doing a video about my glassing setups for years, mainly because they really are a personal preference thing, and everybody's going to be different. Also, more than half of this country, which is mostly whitetail hunters, don't glass at all. So I'm going to make this video as basic as possible with the understanding that it probably won't garner a great amount of interest. Rather than discussing glassing techniques, and there's a million videos out there on that, this video is only going to be about the type of gear that I currently use for glassing. You know, like everything else in the hunting industry, glassing setups go through fads and kind of popularity cycles, depending on what the manufacturers market through sponsored influencers within the industry. I myself have been guilty of following some of these fads in the past, so I'll attempt to cut through the bullshit and give you the reasoning behind the gear that I've settled on. A glassing rig consists of three basic components: the glass, the head, and the tripod. And all three of these components have to work in sync to create a balanced system for you. You know, you don't want some huge video head, you know, on a tiny ultralight tripod that can barely support it. And you don't want a tiny ball head on some huge 99mm objective spotting scope. The type of system that you build will depend mostly on the type of hunting that you do. Are you road hunting, or do you kind of spot and stalk from a truck? Are you strictly a backpack hunter? Are you a day hike hunter? You know, do you want to shoot off the same tripod system that you glass with? Will your system be used with both binoculars and a spotting scope? You know, and how far do you want to glass? All of these different uses require you to build your own specialized system. This is why I don't recommend one of those package deals for a glassing rig that come with everything. It's better to purchase all three components separately so you could tailor your system to your style of hunting. And let me show you what I use. Let's start out with glass first, because the rest of your system is going to be built around the type of glass that you want to use. These days, I glass with my binoculars probably 90% of the time, and with the spotting scope maybe 10% of the time. When I'm scouting before hunting season, I'll often use my spotting scope maybe a little bit more frequently, but the binoculars will always be my main glassing tool. You know, I really like 10x42 or 10x50 binoculars for glassing. You know, some people prefer the bigger 12x50 or even the 15x56 binoculars for glassing. But, you know, what they don't understand is that the 10x42 binoculars have better exit pupil and will provide better low light performance for you. A 10x42 is also easier to carry in a chest rig, and it's a lot easier on your eyes when you glass for prolonged periods. I mainly glass with binoculars because they have almost no eye fatigue, and I like doing pattern scans with a wider field of view, and the binoculars provide that. You could cover way more ground quicker with binoculars. In the old days, you know, everybody glassed with only binoculars, and spotting scopes were really only used at the shooting range for usually competition matches. You know, sheep hunters were the first hunters to start using a spotting scope. You know, those old Unertals. And but those guys, you know, had the money usually to afford the good stuff, and your average guy didn't. When spotting scopes did become common and affordable sometime in the early 80s, Western hunters started using them for mule deer and elk. But still, most hunters were happy with a good set of binoculars. Then the war happened, the war on terror, and the industry started marketing everything and selling everything to your average Joe so they can be a sniper. You know, snipers had spotters, right? So all of a sudden you weren't a real shooter without a spotting scope. You know, then the extreme long-range shooting fad became popular. It was out of that long-range shooting and hunting fad that I started actually using spotting scopes to a good degree. You know, the hunting shows on TV use nothing but spotting scopes, and I'll admit it, because of that hype, I overused my spotting scopes back then. You know, I was finding less game than I was before, and I was always going back to camp every night with a splitting headache. I mean, I was an idiot. So now I use binoculars most of the time to pattern scan for game. And when I find an animal or something suspicious, only then will I break out my spotting scope and start using it to judge an animal or decide whether or not it's worth a stock. Spotting scopes with an objective over 80 to 85 millimeters are kind of too big and heavy for what I normally do. But I also feel that those mini spotting scopes that are getting popular now, you know, the 50 to 55 millimeter spotting scopes, are just too small for what I do. You know, and they usually have horrible eye relief and field of view. The 65 to 80 millimeter scopes are small enough to fit in a day pack, but they're also big enough if you want to glass off the side of the road with big glass. But if you mostly backpack hunt, you know, you might want a smaller spotting scope, and if you mostly glass from the road, you might as well get the biggest damn scope you can afford. Next, you need to decide whether you want an angled or a straight body scope. 10 years ago, if you didn't have an uber cool angled spotter like this, you weren't taken seriously. You know, and I bought into the hype and I used angled spotting scopes for years, but eventually found out that I really didn't like them as much as I thought I did. First of all, I glass 90% of the time with my binoculars. I mean, that's a fact right there. And a straight-bodied scope like this allows me to take this off and throw my binoculars on there without adjusting the tripod at all. You know, straight scope bodies make the transition from binoculars to a spotting scope seamless. And angled scope bodies don't. When you're using an angled scope body like that and you want to transition to binoculars, you have to readjust your tripod for that. And I kind of got sick of doing that. Also, it's pretty hard to locate game with an angled spotting scope. It really is. With a straight spotting scope, you get right on the animals instantly. You know, I'm also usually glassing either straight ahead or down, so a straight scope body is better for that also. And lastly, there's times when I might glass out of the window of my truck, you know, with a window mount. And a straight body spotting scope are must if you want to glass from a vehicle with a window mount. But then again, the angled spotting scopes, particularly if I'm spotting from the road and looking up on hillsides for bedded animals or something like that, the angled scope's a lot better for that, and I'll concede that. And you know, sometimes if I'm hunting out of if I'm glassing out of a truck, scouting around, I might bring both types. For the last 5 years, I've basically been using nothing but Kowa spotting scopes. I mean, I just love them. While I'll concede that Swarovski makes the best spotting scope glass from an optical perspective. No, they don't make their own glass. It's shot glass that they use. Their grind and their coating on that glass is just fantastic. And you can really tell the difference when you look through a whole bunch of spotting scopes. The high-end Swarovski spotting scopes are a class above everything else. But Kowa is a close second in my mind, and you know, you're going to spend $1,000 or more less for the Kowa. But I think even if the Kowa and the Swarovski were the same price, I take the Kowa because I absolutely love the dual focus system. I've actually kind of found I can't live without it. You know, back when Vortex made Generation 1s in Japan, you got this awesome dual focus system, but when they came out with the Gen 2s, you know, they eliminated that dual focus, and you know, now they say made with global components, whatever that means. But Vortex has really went down the toilet. But what I also like about the Kowa is that Kowas are extremely modular spotting scopes. I mean, they're like the AR-15 of spotting scopes, and you could use different eyepieces, you know, wide angle and zoom lenses, a long eye relief eyepiece, a magnification multiplier piece, and a plethora of mounts, covers, and digiscoping options. It's just fantastic. And Kowa makes great quality, top tier glass. Their scopes are light and weight, and I think they have some of the best ergonomics, and it's at a fair price point. So I'm definitely a Kowa fan when it comes to spotting scopes. Now that you've chosen the type of glass that you want to use for your glassing setup, we have to move to the head. The head mounts between the tripod and the optic. And there's three basic types of heads. You have what's known as a pan head, what's known as a fluid head or a video head, and what's known as a ball head. Pan heads are basically three-way heads and are the most basic style of head. You know, although some are better than others, regular pan heads are often cheaply made, really jerky, and they're hard to make micro adjustments on. When you get a package deal with, you know, with a tripod that you buy, you usually get a cheaper pan head like this. But there are some higher quality pan heads like the ones from Outdoorsman and Wiser. Those are pretty good. And next, we have what's known as the fluid head, or what's often called a video head. And they're fluid filled, which make them very smooth. And most hunters prefer a fluid head on their glassing rigs because they give you the ultimate in control and just buttery smooth movement. They also have kind of a vibration dampening effect, and they often eliminate the shaky images you often get with a regular pan head. But the drawback is these are a lot heavier than a standard lightweight pan head. And lastly, we have the ball head. In addition to tilting and panning, the ball head allows you to actually cant the optic from side to side. You know, it doesn't have the smoothness and precision of a fluid head, but a ball head has the best range of motion out of any head. But in my opinion, these can also be really tiring to glass with because they require constant physical control of the optic. Where if you use a fluid head, I mean, you could just simply operate it with a couple of fingers. It's just so smooth and easy to use. It's way less tiring to use the fluid head. And I'd only really use a ball head in one circumstance, and that's if you want to use your rig that you glass with to also shoot off of. You know, the canting feature of the ball head will allow you to level the reticle in your rifle scope while you're shooting. You know, you could put an Arca Swiss rail on your rifle and simply clamp it directly onto the ball head and shoot off of it. You know, or you could throw on some type of rifle saddle and shoot off of that with a standard rifle without an Arca mount. So, you know, and what's cool is this little tiny ball head like this is rated for 44 pounds. So it's easily going to handle any rifle you want to use. So if you're only glassing off your tripod, that's all you use it for, you know, get a good fluid head or a pan head. But if you want to glass and shoot off the same tripod, get the ball head. A tripod can weigh just as much or even more than your spotting scope. A tripod can also be the hardest component of your system to carry in a backpack. So size and weight are usually big considerations with tripods. But you know, if you plan on glassing from the side of the road out of your vehicle, weight and size really doesn't matter. And you might want a big full-size tripod that you can comfortably use while you're standing. I mean, you just throw it in the back seat of your truck with the spotting scope attached and take it out when you need it. Also, if you plan on doing any shooting from your tripod, you want to make sure that you're using a top-tier tripod that can handle that and keep your rifle stable while you're shooting off of it. But, you know, if you need to hike any distance to your glassing spot and carry it in a pack, weight and size really do matter. And most hunters use a tripod with either 4 or 5 leg sections on it that can be used while sitting, because we're usually glassing while we're sitting. Tripods of this size that normally collapse under 18 inches can easily be carried in or attached to almost any day pack. Also, carbon fiber legs were a real game changer with tripods. They shave lots of weight, they increase strength, they have less flex than those aluminum legs, and I think they provide more stability as well. Although some of you old school die-hard hunters out there can sit your butt on bare ground for hours in glass, I'm not one of them. I could do it for a short time, but eventually my ass hurts so bad, it just becomes unbearable. You know, I broke my coccyx twice in my life, you know, with the worst break happening well into adulthood. People who have broken their tailbone a couple of times know what I'm talking about. It just never fully heals, and it gets really ugly on those long flights, drives, or whenever we sit on a firm surface for long periods. For people like us, the extra weight of packing a chair is just worth its weight in gold. Ground pads, whether they're foam or inflatable, or those Crazy Creek ground chairs, are what most hunters use to sit on while they're glassing. But because of my damaged tailbone, I can't stand sitting on those things for more than about 30 minutes. They get painful really fast for me. So I'm going to discuss the pros and cons of some of the packable chairs and stools that are currently on the market. The real advantage of a chair or a stool is that it gets you off the ground. You know, if the ground is cold, a chair keeps you warm. If the ground is covered with ticks, ants, cactus, thorns, scorpions, or spiders, a chair is going to keep you away from that horror show. And a chair can be a lot more comfortable than sitting on a ground pad, in my opinion. The disadvantage of a chair or a stool is that it takes up space and adds weight to your pack. But like I said, for a guy like me, it's well worth it. So let's talk chairs first. If you watched my video titled Camping Setups for the Hunter, you saw that I always bring my Chair Zero with me when I backpack. I think it's one, or probably the best backpack camp chair ever made. You know, but it suffers from the same problem that all of these backpack chairs do. And that's they recline your body too much for glassing, in my opinion. You either have to finagle the tripods over your leg or your lap and somehow get eye relief while you're reclined in that chair, or you have to strain your back trying to lean forward in these deep chairs. So these really don't work well for me personally while I'm glassing, but they're great chairs and they work for a lot of people. In the end with these chairs, yes, I can kick back in my Chair Zero and use my binoculars all day to glass, but when it comes time to use a tripod, I really hate these chairs for that. So your next option is to use a packable stool, and there's 2 types of stools to consider. The first type of stool is a traditional 3-legged stool. You know, there's hundreds of these on the market, and you have to find one that's actually comfortable to the shape of your body because they're all kind of different. You know, because of this triangle shaped seat on these things, you know, most of these will either, the bars will either dig into your ass cheeks or they'll try to fold your balls into a taco. You know, neither of which I like. But if you find a good one that fits, you're going to be a happy spotter with these things. The other type of stool I like is a traditional folding stool. And you can see the profile on this. I actually put this in my day pack. And it comes in this convenient carrying case. Take it out of here. And as you can see, all you do is bam, just like that. What was that? 1 second to deploy here. And this is a timeless design, basically. I mean, remember going out fishing with your grandpa, you probably had a chair like this out there. And these are actually a lot more comfortable, in my opinion, than the three-legged stools. And the legs, because of the design like this, won't dig into soft soil like a three-legged stool does. That's one of the things I hate about those three-legged stools. Or even the Chair Zero sometimes is I'll sit down and those legs will try to dig into the soft dirt. These don't really have that problem. These also are rated for more weight than both the Chair Zero and the three-legged stool. But the advantage of a stool like this to me is that it gets you off the ground and makes leaning into your tripod mounted optic very easy. You know, but these don't have back support, so you might have to take frequent breaks. So it's a compromise, but for me, this is the most comfortable option. And to fold these things down, to pack them away, just like that, and put it back in the case. It's that simple. The vast majority of my hunting is what we call spot and stalk hunting. You know, basically, I go up to a high spot or a ridge that I identified through e-scouting, and I usually glass a basin and or opposing hillside. You know, sometimes I can drive my Jeep up to one of these spots, but I usually have to hike. You know, although sometimes I'll do backpack hunts, most of my hunting is actually out of a day pack like this. And my glassing rig has to be light enough to carry in a day pack like this. So, you know, everything has to fit in here. But luckily, most modern spotting scopes have a design that makes them more, you get the same performance out of a more compact scope. And most of them nowadays have really light magnesium bodies. And, you know, of course, we have carbon fiber tripods now, so it's never been easier to pack a glassing setup, in my opinion. Well, I hiked up to that knoll right there, right up there, so I can glass the saddle and this basin down here. And I usually see a lot of deer here, but today I went up there and glassed for about 4 hours, and I saw about 20 does. And what looked like a spike. I have to go hit those ridges up there. But let me show you what I pack in my day pack for glassing. Pretty simple. Of course, my binos right here. Wear that in a chest harness. And my pack right here. This is one of the older KUIU Venture 1800s. A couple water bottles right there. A water bottle right there. Of course, I bring my Baofeng. So I can listen to weather alerts, and if I'm bored up there, I can shoot the shit on one of the local repeaters. That's always fun. And of course, no cell phone service up here, so I bring my Garmin InReach Mini 2, so I can call for help, text the wife, she can contact me, and you know, it gets a better GPS signal than my phone, so I can sync it to my phone and do good. Start this pocket right here. Okay, gun. A little bit of insurance for myself. This top pocket right here. Toilet paper. A rag. You know, I'm a bald-headed guy and I sweat a lot. Of course, snacks. Lots of snacks. Ooh, Nutter Butter. Always keeping snacks in my pack. in the front right here, I keep a watch cap. If it gets cold on those rigids right there, like I said, I'm a bald guy, and just a knit cap like this is enough to be a game changer and keep me warm. Of course, up here in the mountains, weather changes constantly, and the weatherman is always wrong, so I bring a good rain jacket that's also a windbreaker. And this rain jacket's a little bit thicker too, so it could keep me warm if I need that additional layer. On the inside of the pack here, I have my folding chair that I use for glassing, my folding stool. Of course, a tripod with a video head on it. And, of course, my spotting scope in there. Additional pouch right here. And then I'm not going to take that out, but that's my typical go bag I take everywhere. And that's got first aid supplies in it, a flashlight, a headlamp, a knife, a fire starter. It's got just about everything I need. If an emergency blanket, it's got all that kind of stuff in it. So I don't really travel with much. I travel kind of light, but it's just a day out of glassing, and that's pretty much what I take. Oh, and down in the bottom of this, I have a Sawyer's squeeze to make water if I come across a water source and I want to fill my bottles back up. So that's kind of what I take for a day of glassing. Everybody is going to have slightly different needs and expectations when it comes to glassing, which is kind of why I resisted making this video for so long. I don't want you to go out and buy exactly what I use. I want you to find out what you need and what fits you the best. And like I stated in the prologue, most of you probably aren't even going to need a glassing setup, and just a good set of binoculars hanging off your chest is all you'll ever need or want. But if you hunt in places where a spotting scope setup is necessary for success, I hope I laid out a good foundation of gear for you to consider. A good glassing setup has always been a balancing act between cost, comfort, performance, and weight. You know, there really isn't a perfect system because everything's kind of a compromise between all of these different attributes. In the end, the goal is to locate animals so you can hunt them. Losing that perspective will lead you down a rabbit hole of buying a lot of gear that you don't really need. So do your research and spend your money responsibly. Well, I hope you liked this video about the glassing setups that I currently use. You can reach me with any questions or comments at desertdogoutdoors@gmail.com. Thank you for watching, and as always, good hunting.